My daughter got married, didn't invite me, yet wanted my beach house for her honeymoon, so When the phone rang that morning, I wasn't expecting it to shatter what little peace I had left. "We already got married, Mom," her voice came through, quick and careless, as if she were telling me she just picked up groceries. "We only invited people who really matter. Just send the beach house keys and stop being so dramatic." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I stood there in my garden, pruning roses, with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. She was my only child, the person I had loved more fiercely than anyone in my life, and she was telling me she'd had a wedding without me. The beach house, our beach house, was all she wanted from me now. I forced a polite laugh, my voice calm when my heart was anything but. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. Then I hung up. 3 days later, I left a wedding gift at her door, one that would make her husband scream until his voice broke. But before we get to that part, I need you to understand how we got here. This story didn't start with that phone call. It began 2 years earlier, the day my daughter, Emily, brought a man named Ryan into my life. Back then, I was 65, still working part-time at the library, enjoying quiet days in my little home and summers at our Cape Cod beach house. Emily and I were close. Really close. She called me every day during her lunch breaks. We'd talk about everything. Her job in marketing, silly gossip, the latest TV series we were watching. She was my best friend as much as my daughter. When she met Ryan, she was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Mom, he's different," she told me that first evening, as if she were afraid to jinx it. She'd invited him over for dinner, so I made my famous lasagna, the one she'd been asking for since she was 12. Ryan arrived in a sleek navy suit, carrying roses and wearing a smile that felt polished, maybe too polished. He shook my hand firmly, complimented my home, and asked thoughtful questions about my nursing career. He was handsome, attentive, and seemed to have perfect manners. It should have been charming, but something about the way he spoke, like his words had been rehearsed, made me cautious. Still, Emily was happy. And when she's happy, I'm happy. That night, as he helped clear the table and even offered to wash dishes, I told myself I was being overly protective. Maybe this was the real deal for her. But there were moments, little ones, that stuck with me. The way Ryan brought up the beach house 3 times over dinner, as though it were the most interesting thing about our family. Or how he spoke about Emily like she was an achievement, not a person. It reminded me of my ex-husband, Daniel, Emily's father, whose charm had been just as flawless until it was no longer needed. In the months that followed, I watched Ryan weave himself deeper into Emily's life. Slowly, the daily phone calls became weekly, then monthly, then hardly at all. When I asked why she seemed so distant, she said, "Ryan thinks I should focus more on our relationship. Successful couples prioritize each other." She said it like it was a fact, like it came from a textbook. I told myself she was an adult, 28, independent, and perfectly capable of making her own choices. But then came the first blow. I found out she was engaged through Facebook. A smiling picture of her hand with a massive diamond ring, captioned, "He asked." I said yes. "Can't wait to start our forever together." I stared at that photo for a long time, my coffee growing cold in my hands. There was no call, no message, no moment where she shared the news with me herself. I called her immediately, and she answered in a breathless rush. "Mom, I'm so sorry. It happened last night, and we were caught up in the moment. We called Ryan's parents, and it got so late. I was going to call you this morning, I swear." I congratulated her warmly, even though my chest felt tight. She told me about the proposal, the plans for a spring wedding, and then slipped in that the engagement party was just for Ryan's family and a few friends. No space for me. 6 months passed. I saw Ryan twice in that time, both occasions polite but cold. I was never asked to help with the wedding planning. When I offered, Emily said, "Ryan's handling most of it. His mother has connections." The word stung, but I stayed quiet. Then, one night, she called with what she called a boundaries conversation. Ryan thought she relied on me too much emotionally, that it could harm their marriage. He suggested less contact. He also said it would be healthier if they spent holidays with his family, and hinted that the beach house wasn't really theirs to relax in, since I owned it. I remember sitting in my bedroom after that call, staring at the wall. My daughter, the one I'd raised alone, the one I'd shared every Christmas morning with since she was 8, was talking about our traditions, as though they were a burden. That's when something inside me shifted. I didn't argue. I told her I'd think about it. But in my mind, I was already planning. Not revenge. At least not yet. But I was going to find out exactly who Ryan really was, and why he seemed so fixated on a house that wasn't his. It didn't take much for my gut to confirm what my heart already feared. All it took was a week of careful digging, late nights with my laptop, a few quiet calls to people from Emily's past, and some messages to old friends who still had a knack for finding things out. I started with his name. Ryan Parker. There was no shortage of smiling photos online. Ryan on a yacht, Ryan in a tuxedo, Ryan holding a glass of champagne like he'd been born to it. But buried beneath the glossy surface, I found traces of something darker. A woman named Emma came up first. Pretty, polished, around Emily's age. Her family owned a chain of high-end restaurants. I called a mutual acquaintance, careful to make it sound like idle curiosity. What I learned made my stomach twist. Emma had been engaged to Ryan 2 years earlier. The wedding never happened. Her father had discovered Ryan's gambling debts big enough to sink a small business, and the engagement was called off. Then there was Sarah. Her name popped up in a half-forgotten engagement announcement. 2 years before Emma. Trust fund, wealthy family. That engagement also ended abruptly when her brothers intervened over financial concerns. The pattern was clear, almost rehearsed. Meet a successful woman, charm her, separate her from her support system, and position himself close to her assets. The realization was a cold slap in the face. Ryan wasn't just some overbearing fiancé. He was a predator. And my daughter was his next mark. A week after I started digging, Emily called me on a Wednesday morning while I was deadheading roses in my garden. For a heartbeat, I let myself hope it was a normal conversation. But her tone was strange. Flat. Controlled. Hi, Mom. Just letting you know Ryan and I got married yesterday. The pruning shears froze in my hand. Yesterday. I repeated. I thought the wedding was in October. We decided on something smaller. More intimate. Trevor. Sorry. Ryan felt a big wedding was too much pressure. We kept it simple. I forced my voice to sound warm. I'm sure it was beautiful. It was perfect, she said quickly, as if reading from a script. His parents were there, his sister flew in, my friend Jessica was maid of honor. She trailed off, then added casually. Oh, and we were thinking of spending our honeymoon at the beach house. Could you send us the keys? There it was. The real reason for the call. Not to share joy. Not to invite me into her happiness. Just to get what Ryan wanted all along. The beach house keys? I asked slowly. Right. Ryan's so excited to see it. I've told him about it for years, especially the renovations you've done and the property value appreciation. The words made me smile, but not in a happy way. Property value appreciation. How romantic. And you didn't think to invite me to your wedding? I asked, my voice as steady as I could make it. She hesitated. Mom, please don't make this dramatic. After our boundaries conversation, I thought you'd understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that Ryan had convinced my daughter that excluding me was healthy. That the man she married was skilled at cutting people out until he had full control. Of course, sweetheart, I said finally. I'll make sure you get the keys. When I hung up, I sat on my porch, staring at the roses swaying in the breeze. My hands were steady now. My mind was clear. Ryan thought he'd won. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. By that evening, I'd decided exactly what I would give them for a wedding present. Not revenge. Justice. A gift that would keep on giving long after the honeymoon was over. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every moment I'd seen Ryan with Emily. The too perfect smile, the questions about the beach house, the way he always seemed to steer the conversation toward finances without making it obvious. Now that I knew what I was looking at, it was all there in plain sight. I wanted to act fast, but I also knew I couldn't be reckless. Men like Ryan thrived on twisting the narrative, making themselves the victim. If I confronted him head-on without proof, he'd spin it into another example of me interfering in Emily's marriage. So I focused on evidence. Cold, undeniable facts he couldn't talk his way out of. That Thursday night, I called an old acquaintance, a private investigator named Mark Jensen. He'd helped me track down a runaway teenager for a friend years ago, and I knew he was discreet. I need everything you can find on a man named Ryan Parker, I told him. And I need it fast. Mark didn't waste time. By Friday evening, he called me back, his voice grim. Carol, you're not going to like what I found. Over the phone, he painted the picture I'd already begun to imagine. Ryan had no stable employment history. His consulting business was little more than a shell company. And then Mark mentioned something I hadn't expected. A connection to my late husband, Daniel. His grandfather, William Parker, was involved in a real estate development scam back in the late 80s, Mark explained. Your husband was one of his victims. The words made my skin prickle. I remembered those years, the sleepless nights, the whispered arguments when Daniel thought Emily was in bed. The failed shopping center project that had drained our savings and sent our marriage into a tailspin. I'd always known Daniel's partner had stolen from him, but I'd never known the man's name. Until now. Mark went on, his tone steady but heavy. Before he died, William Parker apparently confessed to hiding over $2 million in offshore accounts. That money should have gone to Daniel's estate. Since he passed away, Emily is the rightful heir. And just like that, Ryan's interest in Emily, and the beach house, made perfect, calculated sense. This wasn't just about charming his way into a wealthy family. This was about reclaiming stolen money. Only not for Emily, but for himself. By Saturday, my plan was in motion. I spent the day gathering everything. Public records of the old real estate deal, copies of court documents, news clippings about William Parker's deathbed confession. I even managed to get in touch with an attorney who had handled part of Daniel's estate. A sharp woman named Patricia Winters who nearly dropped her coffee when I told her Ryan's full name. Carol, she said firmly, this could be criminal. If he's been accessing those accounts, that's money laundering. And if he married Emily to gain legal access to her inheritance, that's fraud. The words didn't scare me. They fueled me. By Monday morning, I had a leather portfolio filled with everything. It wasn't just a file. It was a weapon. I wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with a white satin bow, and wrote a note in my neatest handwriting. Congratulations on your marriage. Every new husband should know his wife's family history. With love, Carol. I drove to their apartment building, my heart pounding but my hands steady. The gift looked so elegant sitting there on their doorstep, I almost laughed. If Ryan had the slightest idea what was inside, he'd have burned it before opening. When I got home, I made tea and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Emily's number. But when I answered, it was Ryan's voice, shouting so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What the hell is wrong with you, you crazy old witch? I set my teacup down carefully. Hello, Ryan. I take it you opened your wedding gift. This isn't funny. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. Oh, I said lightly. And what exactly would you report? That your mother-in-law gave you a gift containing public records. In the background, I heard Emily crying. She tried to take the phone, but Ryan barked, no. She's trying to ruin our marriage before it even starts. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Ryan, I thought you'd appreciate learning about your grandfather's business history. And those offshore accounts. You know, the ones that rightfully belong to Emily? The shouting stopped. What came next was quieter, but trembling. You're lying. I never lie, I said calmly. I'm a retired nurse. We're trained to be precise about facts. But don't take my word for it. Mr. Rodriguez in Miami still remembers your grandfather. He's very interested in hearing from you. There was silence. Then a muffled, furious sound, like someone pacing the room, trying to decide whether to explode or to run. And Ryan. I added, my tone light as sugar. The keys to the beach house are in the portfolio too. I'm sure you'll find it relaxing to discuss your family's financial history by the ocean. I hung up, poured myself another cup of tea, and settled into my chair. The game had just shifted, and this time, the rules were mine. I didn't expect Emily to call me right away. I knew how these things worked. Ryan would be pacing, spinning his version of events, pouring poison into her ear until she doubted every word I'd said. He'd tell her I was jealous, controlling, unable to let go. He'd twist the truth until it looked like I was the problem. But I didn't care. The truth was in her hands now, printed neatly in black and white. Whether she read it that afternoon or a week later didn't matter. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The call came that evening, just after sunset. I was sitting on my porch, watching the sky fade into soft pinks and purples, when my phone lit up. Emily's name. My heart squeezed at the sight of it. "Mom," she said the second I answered. Her voice was tight, hoarse from crying. I could hear muffled shouting in the background. Ryan's voice, sharp and angry. "What did you do?" "I gave you a wedding gift," I said gently. "Did you read through everything?" "I read enough. Ryan says it's all lies. He says you're trying to break us up." I took a breath. "And what do you think, Emily?" There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. I need you to explain some things. Ryan's grandfather really stole money from Dad. $2.3 million, I said softly. Your father spent years trying to get it back. But William Parker disappeared. The stress. It's part of why your father left when you were 8. He couldn't handle the ruin or the lawsuits. "And Ryan knew about this money?" she whispered. I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew how much it would hurt her to hear it. The investigator found records of Ryan accessing those accounts for the past 5 years. He's been living off that money, Emily. Money that legally belongs to you. "That's impossible," she said, her voice breaking. "Ryan has a consulting business. He helps rich people invest." "When's the last time you saw him work, Emily? Really work? When's the last time he had a client meeting, took a business call, showed you a contract?" Silence. Then in the background, Ryan's voice. "Hang up the phone. Now." "The law firm wants to meet with you," I said quickly. "You have a legal claim to that money, plus interest. They estimate it's worth nearly $4 million now." $4 million? She repeated, barely above a whisper. "Ryan married you 3 days after I hired the investigator. Don't you think the timing is strange?" Ryan's voice came closer to the phone, full of rage. "She's lying. She's jealous. She's trying to destroy us." "Emily," I said, my tone steady, "if none of this is true, why is he so angry? If his grandfather was innocent, wouldn't he want to clear the family name? Wouldn't he be curious about justice for what happened to your father?" There was no answer, only her uneven breathing. "Emily," I continued softly, "there's something else. The investigator found records of 2 other women, Emma and Sarah. Both had family money. Both were engaged to Ryan before you. And both broke it off when their families discovered his financial deception." "Stop," she whispered. "I have their contact information if you want to talk to them." I said stop, she cried, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring out at the darkening sky. The truth was in her head now, rattling around like a stone in a jar. She wouldn't be able to forget it. I knew the next few days would be hell for her. I also knew that sometimes the first step toward freedom is when the lie starts to crack and the light begins to get in. The phone stayed silent that night and the next. I tried not to worry. I told myself to be patient, that she needed time to wrestle with the truth on her own. But on Sunday morning, I opened my front door and there she was, sitting on my porch steps, still wearing the same clothes from Friday, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't say hello. She just looked up at me and said, "Tell me everything." I stepped aside, my throat tight, and let her in. Emily stepped into the kitchen like someone moving through a dream, slow and uncertain, glancing at the familiar walls as though she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. I put on a pot of coffee, because in our family, coffee meant we were going to sit down and face the hard things together. We sat at the same old table where she used to do her homework as a child, where we'd planned her college essays, where we'd laughed and cried over 1,000 ordinary days. But that morning, she didn't touch the coffee I poured for her. She kept staring into the steam, her hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Ryan left yesterday," she said finally, her voice flat. "He packed 2 suitcases, said he needed time to think. He told me you were poisoning our marriage with lies, and if I believed you over him, then maybe we weren't meant to be together." I recognized the tactic instantly. "That's a classic move," I told her. make you feel like you're the one responsible for saving the relationship, force you into a corner where you have to choose between him and the truth. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the table toward me. After he left, I went through his things, his laptop, his desk, everything. I found these. I opened the folder and felt my stomach twist. Dozens of printed emails lay inside, all between Ryan and someone named Marcus Webb. They were detailed discussions about the Parker inheritance, offshore accounts, and how to maintain access without raising suspicion. The dates go back 2 years, Emily said, her voice trembling. That's months before I even met him. He was planning before he accidentally ran into me at that coffee shop. I looked up, my eyes meeting hers. You called Emma, didn't you? She nodded slowly. She told me everything. How he isolated her from her family. How he convinced her to put him on her bank accounts. How he even had her write a will, leaving everything to him. Her father hired a detective, and Ryan disappeared overnight. Emily's voice hardened. Emma put me in touch with Sarah. Same story, Mom. Same pattern. Different woman. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart. She shook her head. Don't apologize. You tried to warn me. I didn't listen. I believed a man I'd known for 2 years over the mother who raised me. I let him convince me that you were the problem. Her words were like a knife, but they were also a kind of healing. At least she saw it now. There's something else, Emily said, her eyes flashing with a mix of pain and fury. Emma told me that Ryan researches women before he accidentally meets them. He knew about the beach house. He knew about Dad's financial troubles. He knew you were a widow. He planned all of it. The room felt still, like even the air was holding its breath. What are you going to do? I asked softly. Emily looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was 12 years old and had decided to stand up to a bully at school. Determined. Fierce. Unshakable. I'm going to destroy him, she said simply. But I'm going to need your help. For the first time in 2 years, my daughter was asking me for help instead of pushing me away. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Not the polite kind I'd given her over the phone, but a real, full smile. Tell me what you need. The plan we came up with was simple but sharp, the kind of thing that would cut clean and leave no doubt about who had done it. Ryan would come back. Men like him always did when they thought the danger had passed. He'd apologize, promise to change, maybe claim he'd been confused or overwhelmed by the accusations. He'd try to smooth things over and get back to his original plan of getting his hands on Emily's assets. But when he came back, we'd be ready. On Monday morning, Emily called Patricia Winters, the lawyer I'd spoken to earlier. Patricia confirmed what I already knew. Emily had a legal claim to the money Ryan's grandfather had stolen. But there was more. Because Ryan had been accessing those accounts knowing they contained stolen funds, he could be charged with money laundering and criminal conspiracy. Then Patricia connected us with a federal investigator, Agent Jennifer Liu, who had been tracking Ryan for months based on complaints from Emma and Sarah's families. We've been waiting for the right opportunity to move forward, Agent Liu told us over a conference call. Your case provides the missing pieces we need. If you're willing to cooperate, we can set up a controlled operation. Emily didn't even hesitate. I'm in. On Wednesday afternoon, Ryan finally texted her. Can we talk? I miss you. I'm ready to come home. Emily showed me the message, her hand steady even though I could see the tension in her jaw. Should I respond? Yes, I told her. Tell him you miss him too. Tell him you're sorry for doubting him. Make him believe you're ready to let it go. She typed the message, each word dripping with the kind of fake sweetness Ryan would eat up. Within minutes, he replied that he'd be home Friday evening and that they could start fresh. On Thursday morning, Agent Liu briefed us on the plan. The apartment would be monitored, and Emily would wear a wire. The goal was simple. Get Ryan to admit he knew about the stolen money and that he married her to gain access to it. What if he doesn't confess? Emily asked. Then we go forward with the financial evidence we already have, Agent Liu assured her. But a confession would make the case airtight and help us bring justice to the other victims too. By Friday, I could barely sit still. I told myself to read a book, to keep busy, but my eyes kept darting to my phone. At 7:43 p.m., Emily texted. He's here. At 8:15. He brought flowers and wine. Playing the perfect husband. At 8:52. He's talking about a honeymoon. Asking about my savings account. At 9:31. Got him to admit he knew about the offshore accounts. FBI moving in now. I set my phone down and exhaled, the kind of breath you don't even realize you've been holding until it's gone. Ryan Parker's game was over. The next morning, the news was everywhere, though they didn't use Emily's name. The headline in the Portland Press-Herald read, "Local man arrested in multi-state financial fraud scheme." And there it was, Ryan's mugshot, his perfect hair flattened against his head, his smug smile replaced by a blank, stunned expression. He didn't look like the polished charmer who had once stood in my kitchen complimenting my lasagna. He looked like what he truly was, a criminal who had run out of lies. I sat at my kitchen table with the paper spread out in front of me, sipping coffee and letting the weight of it sink in. Ryan Parker was in federal custody. He couldn't hurt Emily anymore. He couldn't charm another woman into giving up her friends, her family, her money. Emily came over just before lunch, carrying a bag of Chinese takeout like we used to do on rainy days. She set the bag down and started unpacking cartons without a word, her face lighter than I'd seen in months. "Agent Lou called me this morning," she said finally, spooning sweet and sour chicken onto a plate. "Ryan's been formally charged, conspiracy, money laundering, fraud across multiple states. His bail's set at $500,000. I nearly choked on my tea. $500,000? She nodded, almost smiling. Apparently, they think he's a flight risk. Offshore accounts, history of disappearing when confronted, and now all his assets are frozen. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the clink of chopsticks and the soft hum of the fridge filling the space between us. It wasn't the heavy, awkward silence we'd shared in recent months. This was calmer. Safer. "Mom," Emily said quietly after a while, "I need to ask you something. And I want the truth." I set my chopsticks down. "Always. How long did you know? About him. About what he was really after." I thought about softening the truth, but she deserved better. I suspected something from the beginning, but I didn't have proof until about 3 months ago. That's when I hired the private investigator. She nodded slowly. "Right around the time I told you about boundaries." "Yes. And you didn't tell me then because you knew I wouldn't believe you." I met her eyes. "Would you have?" Her lips pressed together. "No. I would have thought you were jealous. Or trying to interfere. He had me so convinced you were the problem." She looked down at her plate, moving her food around without eating it. "How did you even know to check his grandfather's background?" "I recognized the name Parker from your father's old papers. When I realized the connection, I knew there had to be more to the story." Emily was quiet for a long time, her shoulders slightly hunched. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I was awful to you. I excluded you from my own wedding. I said things I didn't mean." "Emily." "No, let me finish," she said firmly. "I chose a man I'd known for 2 years over the mother who raised me alone. I let him convince me that my own experience of love and family was wrong. I'm ashamed." I reached over and covered her hand with mine. "You were manipulated by someone who was very, very good at it. That's not a weakness. That's proof he saw your strength and wanted to control it." She gave me a watery smile. "How do I make this right between us?" "You already have. You're here. You're safe. You're free." We finished our lunch, then pulled out old photo albums from the hall closet. We sat on the couch with the afternoon light spilling across the pages, pointing at pictures from summers at the beach house, from birthdays and graduations, from moments we'd almost forgotten. At one point, Emily laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, and the sound of it made my eyes sting. It was like a piece of her had come back. When she stood to leave, she lingered at the door. "Mom, Agent Lou says the other victims' families are filing a civil suit. They want me to join them." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to?" Her smile this time wasn't watery or unsure. It was fierce. "Oh, absolutely. I'm going to make sure Ryan never has the chance to do this to anyone again." That's my girl, I thought. 6 weeks later, the trial began. I sat in the gallery every day, watching my daughter tell her story with a calm strength that made me proud beyond words. Emma flew in from Seattle to testify, her voice steady as she described how Ryan had almost taken everything from her. Sarah came from New York, nervous but determined. Together, they painted a picture of a man who had spent years perfecting a system to prey on smart, successful women with money in their families. The defense tried to portray Ryan as a misguided man who had made bad choices. But the facade cracked completely when Marcus Webb took the stand. Webb had been corresponding with Ryan about the offshore accounts for years, and he testified that Ryan had chosen Emily specifically because she was Daniel's heir, and that marrying her was part of his plan to claim the stolen money as community property. Emily's hands clenched in her lap when she heard Webb say she was the ideal target. I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, but I also saw something else: anger. Controlled, focused, unstoppable. The jury took less than 3 hours to come back with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, money laundering, fraud, and a new charge: criminal marriage fraud with intent to commit grand larceny. The judge sentenced Ryan to 12 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay back over $8 million to all his victims, including interest and damages. When Emily gave her victim impact statement, she didn't cry. She looked right at Ryan and said, "You stole 2 years of my life, my trust in the people I love, and my belief in myself. But you didn't break me. And you never will." I sat there, watching my daughter stand in front of the man who had tried to dismantle her life piece by piece, and I thought, "You've come back stronger than you were before." When we left the courthouse that day, Emily turned to me in the parking lot. "Mom, someday, when I meet someone who actually deserves me, will you help me plan my wedding?" I smiled through tears. "It would be an honor." She grinned. "And I want it at the beach house. Barefoot in the sand. Fairy lights between the dunes. Just like we always talked about. The beach house. Our beach house. The place Ryan had wanted so badly. Now forever out of his reach. Some gifts, like the truth, can't be taken back. And this one had set my daughter free." The civil trial came quicker than I expected. Even though the criminal case had wrapped up, there were still open wounds. Financial ones that the court couldn't fully heal without more action. Patricia Winters, the estate attorney, explained it plainly to Emily over coffee one morning. The criminal conviction put him in prison, but the civil trial is how you get back what's rightfully yours. And it's not just about you, it's about all the other women he's taken from. Emily didn't even hesitate. "Then I'm in. Every single dollar he took from anyone needs to be returned." The lawsuit united them: Emily, Emma, and Sarah. 3 women who might never have met if not for the same man's greed. I watched as they became allies, trading messages late at night, comparing timelines, helping the lawyers piece together exactly how Ryan had wormed his way into each of their lives. When the first day of the civil trial began, we walked into the courthouse together. The 3 of them didn't look like victims. They looked like a wall he couldn't break through. Emily wore a soft blue blazer that made her eyes stand out, her hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight and calm. Emma's expression was cool and unreadable, while Sarah's hand shook slightly at first, but she held her head high. The prosecution laid it all out again, but this time, the focus wasn't on criminal charges. It was about money. How much Ryan had stolen, how much damage he'd done, and how much needed to be paid back. Seeing the numbers on paper was staggering. Nearly $8 million combined, including Emily's inheritance, Emma's trust, and Sarah's investments. Ryan wasn't in the courtroom, he was already behind bars, but his presence was everywhere. His lawyer tried to poke holes in the testimony, suggesting some of the women had been willing participants in financial decisions, that relationships came with shared risk. But that argument crumbled when the attorney for the plaintiffs pulled up records of Ryan's systematic research. Screenshots of him scrolling through public records, studying family histories, bookmarking photos of houses and vacation homes. When the judge saw the evidence, he leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "This isn't shared risk. This is calculated theft." The most emotional moment came when Marcus Webb, already serving his reduced sentence for testifying in the criminal trial, was brought in to speak again. He confirmed that Ryan had kept detailed files on each woman, updating them regularly with financial estimates, property values, and even notes about their emotional states. He said women who are independent but have a close emotional tie to one person, like a mother, were the easiest to turn, Webb admitted, his eyes on the table. If he could create tension between them, the woman would have no one left to question his decisions. I looked at Emily then. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just took a slow, steady breath, as though she'd already decided she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurt anymore. When Emily took the stand, her voice didn't waver. She told the court about the engagement party she wasn't invited to, the boundaries conversation, the holidays taken away, and finally, the wedding she didn't even know had happened until it was over. But the truth, she said, is that those weren't random choices. They were part of a plan to make me dependent on him. A plan to make me forget who I was without him. She glanced in my direction then, just for a second, and I knew she was thinking about every phone call we'd missed, every holiday spent apart, every quiet moment that had been stolen from us. The trial lasted a week. At the end, the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, ordering that all available assets from Ryan's accounts be liquidated and split among the women, with future earnings garnished to pay the remainder. It wouldn't undo the past, but it was a step toward rebuilding. Outside the courthouse, the three women stood together while reporters shouted questions they didn't answer. They weren't there for the cameras. They were there for each other. As the crowd thinned, Emily walked over to me. Her eyes were tired but clear. "It's over," she said simply. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. It's just beginning. You get to decide what comes next now. No one else." She smiled, small but real. "Then I think I want to start with Christmas at the beach house. Just you and me. Like always." Those words landed in my chest like a warm ember, something that had been cold for too long finally glowing again. December came with the kind of sharp, cold air that made the ocean smell even stronger. Emily arrived at the beach house on Christmas Eve, just like she had every year before Ryan. She stood on the porch for a long moment, her suitcase in hand, looking out toward the dunes and the churning winter waves. "It feels like I haven't been here in forever," she said as I opened the door. "It's only been 2 years," I told her, smiling softly. "But it's felt longer for me too." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. I decorated it just as we used to. Garland on the banister, the tree in the corner by the window, fairy lights draped along the mantel. The same lights Emily had once said she wanted for her wedding, back when she was still the kind of girl who believed love could be simple. She set her bags down and walked slowly through each room, running her hand along the banister, pausing in front of the old family photos on the wall. She stopped at one of her at age 12, grinning, wearing a bathing suit, holding a bucket full of seashells. "I used to think I'd get married here," she murmured. "You still can," I said gently. "Someday. When it's with someone who loves you for you, not for what you have." We spent the night as we always had. Matching pajamas, hot chocolate in mugs that didn't match, Christmas music low in the background. We stayed up late wrapping each other's gifts, though we both already knew what the other had bought. That was the thing about being close. You didn't need surprises to feel joy. At one point, while folding the last of the wrapping paper, Emily went quiet. She looked down at her hands for a long time before speaking. "I keep thinking about all the little ways he got to me. How I stopped calling you, stopped asking for your advice. I thought it was because I was becoming independent. But I was just letting him shrink my world down until it was only him." I didn't interrupt. I knew she needed to say it all out loud. "He never yelled at me, not at first. He just made me feel like I had to explain myself all the time. Like every decision I made needed his approval. And if I said I wanted to see you, he'd get quiet and withdrawn. Not angry, just disappointed. It's like he knew I'd work twice as hard to make him happy again." "That's how people like him work," I said softly. "They don't just take your money. They take your sense of self, your instincts, until you're not sure what's real anymore. That's why you can't blame yourself, Emily." "He was very good at what he did." She nodded, but I could see the heaviness in her eyes. Healing wasn't instant, even when the danger was gone. The next morning, we opened gifts under the tree. I'd bought her a thick wool coat, deep green, the exact color of her eyes. She'd bought me a leather-bound journal, knowing I'd been meaning to start writing down my memories of her childhood. After breakfast, we bundled up and walked along the beach. The air was crisp, the tide low, the sand cold beneath our boots. She linked her arm through mine, just like she used to when she was little. "I've been thinking," she said as we walked. "I want to do something with all this. Not just take the settlement money and move on. I want to help other women who've been through the same thing. Maybe set up a fund or work with a charity." I squeezed her arm. "That sounds like the best thing you could do. Turn something ugly into something that helps others. We walked in silence for a while, listening to the waves. And then, almost shyly, she said, "When I do get married someday, will you walk me down the aisle?" I stopped walking and looked at her. Of course. I'd be honored. She smiled, and in that moment, I saw her not as the woman who had been manipulated and hurt, but as the strong, vibrant person she'd always been. Someone who had survived something terrible and was still standing. The beach house had always been a place of beginnings for us. And now, it felt like we were beginning again. By spring, Emily had found a new rhythm to her life. The legal battles were behind her now, Ryan locked away, the settlement money secured, but she wasn't interested in just moving on and pretending none of it had happened. She told me one afternoon over coffee, "I can't stop thinking about the women who didn't have a mom like you to fight for them. Or the ones who didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. I want to do something for them." And she did. It started small, a few calls to charities that supported victims of financial abuse, then meetings with legal aid groups who specialized in helping people recover stolen assets. Within months, she'd formed a non-profit dedicated to providing free legal consultations and emotional support for women leaving manipulative relationships. She named it Second Light, because, she said, even when someone tries to put it out, there's always a way to find your light again. I watched her pour herself into it the way she once poured herself into her career, but this time, it wasn't about status or climbing some invisible ladder. This time it was about purpose. She met with survivors every week, sometimes in person, sometimes over video calls. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it was with a quiet confidence that only comes from surviving something yourself. One evening, she invited me to a small gathering at the community center. 10 women sitting in a circle, sharing their stories. Some were fresh out of relationships. Others were years removed but still carrying the scars. Emily didn't center herself in the conversation. She let the others speak first, only stepping in when someone needed a reminder that they weren't stupid for falling for a charming liar, or weak for struggling to leave. When the meeting ended, one woman, a petite brunette in her early 30s, pulled Emily aside. I was close enough to hear her whisper, "I don't think I would have had the courage to leave if I hadn't heard your story." "Thank you." Emily smiled and hugged her. "You gave yourself that courage. I just helped you see it." On the drive home, I glanced at her in the passenger seat, her face lit by the streetlights as we passed under them. "You know," I said, "your dad would be proud of you." She looked out the window for a long moment. "Do you think so?" "I know so. He'd see that you took something that could have broken you and turned it into something that helps others. That's the kind of strength you can't fake." We pulled into my driveway, and she didn't get out right away. Instead, she turned toward me. "Mom, I've been thinking about something else. About the beach house. I know it's yours, and it always will be, but someday, I want to get married there. And I want you to be the one who invites everyone. No more being left out. No more boundaries that are just excuses to push people away." Her voice wavered slightly, but there was determination beneath it. "I want to fill it with people who matter. People who love us. People who actually deserve to be there." I reached over and took her hand. "Then that's exactly what we'll do. When the time comes, we'll make it the kind of day you always dreamed of. Barefoot in the sand. Fairy lights between the dunes. And no one will take that from us again." As she drove away later that night, I stood on the porch watching her taillights disappear down the street. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something new. And as proud as I was of the work she was doing for others, I knew the quiet victory was this. She had found her way back to herself. Summer came again, and with it, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Not just from the weather, but from the way life finally felt settled. The storm that Ryan had dragged into our lives had passed, and the air around us felt lighter. The beach house was no longer a place I associated with tension or fear that he might one day get his hands on it. It was ours again, just ours. Emily started spending more weekends there with me. We'd sit on the porch with coffee in the mornings, watching the tide roll in, and in the evenings, we'd light candles and cook dinner together. The conversations were easy again. No unspoken tension. No invisible wall between us. One Saturday afternoon, we were sitting at the long wooden table on the porch, eating fresh crab rolls and watermelon, when Emily leaned back in her chair and said, "You know, Mom, I think I've finally figured out what this whole thing taught me. I looked at her, curious. What's that? That love isn't just about how someone makes you feel when everything's easy, she said. It's about how they behave when things aren't. Ryan was perfect when we met. Thoughtful, attentive, sweet. But the moment he thought I might not be useful to him, that love disappeared. And I let myself believe that was normal, that relationships just change like that. She paused, brushing hair from her face. The truth is, I didn't lose myself overnight. I gave away little pieces of who I was, one compromise at a time, until I barely recognized the person I'd become. I nodded slowly, letting her words hang in the salty air between us. That's the danger with people like Ryan, I said softly. They don't take it all at once. They take just enough that you don't notice, until it's too late. Emily's eyes met mine. But you noticed. And you didn't give up on me, even when I pushed you away. I smiled, my chest tightening. That's what mothers do. We don't stop caring just because someone tells us to. Even if our children can't see it at the time, we stay. She looked down at her plate, then back at me. I thought I'd never be able to forgive myself for the way I treated you. For that phone call. The one where I told you to stop being dramatic and just send me the keys. I remembered it vividly, standing in my garden, the sun on my back, hearing my daughter speak to me like a stranger. I forgave you before you even hung up, Emily. Because I knew it wasn't really you speaking. It was him through you. And deep down, I knew the real you would come back to me someday. We sat there for a long moment in comfortable silence, the sound of waves filling the space. Finally, she said, I've been talking to a few of the women from Second Light about hosting a retreat here at the beach house. A weekend where they can get away from everything. No partners, no pressure, just a safe place to breathe. That's a beautiful idea, I said. This place has always been where we came to heal. Now it can do that for other people too. She smiled, her eyes glinting in the late afternoon light. Maybe I'll even get married here one day. But this time, the only man I'll choose will be someone who loves this view as much as I do, and loves you as much as I do. That's a very high standard, I teased. That's the point, she said, grinning. That night, after she went to bed, I sat out on the porch alone. The moonlight shimmered on the water, and I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the manipulation, the isolation. Ryan had thought he could cut us apart, keep Emily from the one person who would see through him. And for a while, he'd succeeded. But what he didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that love built on years of shared history can't be erased by a few months of poison. He had mistaken distance for destruction. He thought that if he kept us apart, our bond would weaken. But he was wrong. All he'd done was stretch it, like pulling on a rope that only snaps back harder once you let go. The next morning, Emily joined me on the porch, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. She handed me a cup of coffee and sat beside me, tucking her legs under herself like she used to when she was a teenager. You know, Mom, she said, I think I finally understand why you went through all that trouble to dig up the truth instead of just warning me. If you'd just told me, I wouldn't have believed you. I had to see it for myself. I nodded. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be lived. And some truths, you have to discover on your own, no matter how much it hurts. She sipped her coffee, staring out at the horizon. I wish I'd figured it out sooner. But maybe I needed to go through it. I'm not the same person I was before him. I'm stronger now. Smarter. And I'll never ignore my instincts again. That, I said, is the real gift you walked away with. She glanced at me. The gift of truth? Yes, I said. Because once you've unwrapped it, you can't ever put it back. And no one can take it from you. She smiled softly. And you gave me that gift. We didn't speak for a while after that. We didn't need to. The ocean was speaking for us, steady and constant, like it had been for every summer we'd spent here together. By the time Emily packed her things to leave that Sunday, the air felt different. There was no shadow hanging over us, no unspoken ache. Just two women, mother and daughter, walking each other to the car, knowing they'd weathered the worst and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. As she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, I love you, Mom. Thank you for never giving up on me. I held her tighter than I had in years. Always. Emily. Always. I stood on the porch long after her car disappeared down the road, the sound of the waves in my ears. Ryan had taken a lot from us, but in the end, he had given us something too, without meaning to. He'd shown us what we could survive, what we could rebuild, and how unbreakable the bond between a mother and her daughter truly was. And as I turned back toward the beach house, I thought, some wedding gifts really do keep on giving. Especially the kind wrapped in the truth.